Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Perpetual Chess. We have a return guest joining us from 8 years ago somehow. He was a Scholastic champion, but these days, of course, is best known as the Chief Chess Officer at Chess.com. Really needs no introduction. International Master Danny Rensch. Welcome back to the pod, Danny.
Thanks for having me back. It was 8 years ago.
How crazy is that?
Yeah, that is so crazy.
Yeah.
What year are we? We're in 2025, so that was 2017 apparently.
Yeah, our mutual friend Mike Klein, when we were talking about doing this email, mentioned 8 years ago. Is that right? I had to double check, and yeah, amazing. But let's hop right into the chess talk, Danny. I know that you're a busy guy. So you recently did an interview with Greg Mustreader where you talked some about recent cheat detection issues. And don't worry, listeners, we're not only going to talk about cheat detection, but I did want to begin with the most pertinent, the most hot button topic in all of chess at all times. And you talked about chess.com's change in public closure stance, whereas before you would not have it publicly known when an account was closed. Now people can find out if they do some snooping. And it's been 8 months since that announcement, but one thing I did not hear you address either with Greg Mustreader or in your recent State of the Chess.com YouTube video is whether you feel like it's having some success. Do you think that this is deterring players, or is it too early to tell?
You know, I think the right answer from a data perspective is almost always it's too early to tell. Good to let things play out, especially when the truth is, I think it is too early to tell. The conversations, I think, have been more intense at times because of the title players we have closed publicly since we changed that policy. Internally, there are, intense conversations when that happens because, we're always doing everything we can to not only double check ourselves and do all the stuff before we take that action. And not that we didn't do that before, right? But I think we're just really, really dialing in on what our approach is to that. And so when a conversation also breaks out on Reddit or Twitter and someone is denying and this and that, like the process itself is intense and we take it super seriously. I don't really know how to say whether it's deterred anyone yet. I think we've seen a lot of positive momentum. I've privately gotten some feedback from players that they do feel like a couple of things have started deterring it. Maybe not just the public closures, the fact that we're using Proctor and have been for longer than people now know, just the level of I think the level of expectation that is then put on the player and whatever it is to maybe really be all over someone, that might also be just a deterrent. So I'll say this, we are seeing positive signs. I don't know what to attribute the deterrence to.
Okay. And for listeners who aren't familiar, I did hear you mention Proctor a couple times. What exactly is it?
So Proctor is a proprietary software we've been working on now for a couple of years. We started, I'll give you as quick a TLDR as possible, but just to give a little context of how we got there, because I think it's interesting. We started with a third-party firm that we actually hired to help us develop it. One, to save on our own internal engineering resources, but two, because there are a lot of companies in the ed tech space who have already invested in all types of custom proprietary ways to track and detect cheating. They do this for tests. I think a lot of these companies really started to take off during the pandemic. And so we interviewed a number of different firms, ultimately hired the services of a company we like to kind of get us to a certain level of it. And at some point, our own engineers really took over. What it is a software, a browser that players have to download, and they are only able to compete in prize events through that particular browser, which rather than us having to jump through hoops and ask players manually to check their task manager or look what's going on, it's tracking everything in real time. It also connects with plugins that are video and audio driven. So we are essentially looking at a player using a software that tracks anything and everything that will be going on a machine that we would care about. It also syncs in real time with both camera and audio. And when you add that to the second cam devices we have, for some players randomly chosen, some not so random if they're people we're tracking, it really has just improved our ability to feel super confident that we're looking at a clean player, or at least someone who, if they are cheating, are using the same type of stuff that should be detected in over-the-board cheating, right? In the sense that if there's a hidden device or some sort of communication, I would argue that in some ways our events with Proctor being individually all over someone, and with the stuff we're tracking behind the scenes, and you add the data that we kind of have on top of it, our events are probably, trending a lot cleaner than maybe people think, or at least that some of the conversation has been.
That's good news. And 25% or so, you said, of current like Title Tuesday type event participants are using Proctor. How is it determined which players use it currently?
So right now, some have been opt-in. Some have been players that we were already tracking for a number of different reasons. Again, sometimes it is performance-based, sometimes it is random. And we have been running players in and out of Zoom observation, if you will, for a very long time. But the bandwidth to do that at scale is super hard just on the team, and also some of the software, if it isn't built to track the things like we have Proctor tracking, it is clunky and it adds a lot of operational tasks to our staff. So we've already been doing that though for a while and just kind of picking and choosing people. And so a lot of the people that were being observed already were sort of transferred over to Proctor. And then as we saw Proctor get stable, work out some of the bugs, some of the early stuff, we have started expanding it and requiring it of a lot of players. We don't actually know what the policy will be when we land on it, and if it'll be something that is always required for everyone, if it'll be at mass scale for most people, if there will be some pick and choosing. The main thing for us has been to make sure that the software itself is doing everything we need it to do, and we will only be increasing the amount of players who are required to use Proctor.
And so far, I know that some of this stuff, maybe you're not at liberty to answer, but so far, has anyone who the team asked to use Proctor refused to use it?
Yes, we have had a few people refuse to use it. And then they have either been educated on the fact that it is not malware or spyware. It's only to be used for these purposes. And we provide them with, if you will, kind of the assurances and the security in terms of what it is we're asking them to do. So a lot of those players, having been given that explanation, then use it a second time. But we have had players the first time kind of be like, I don't feel comfortable with this. We respect that. We then respect that we have the right to say you can't play right now. So let's have a conversation with our team when you're ready to have that, to understand what we're doing and why this is important. But yeah, we have had some refuse to use it and then not be allowed to play until they allow us to have Proctor running.
So this could happen like in the middle of Title Tuesday, for example?
It usually happens at the beginning.
Okay.
If a player is refusing to cooperate and or just doesn't feel good about it, respecting their right to that position, a lot of that happens in the beginning, or at least usually before round 3. The team works extra hard to make sure that we don't get far along with anyone if they've been asked to do something and they don't cooperate. We operate with kindness and courtesy to respect that, okay, sometimes people don't see your message, sometimes they miss this link. So we try to navigate as best we can the benefit of the doubt. But once a player kind of has a pattern and or it's clear that they received the message, if they don't cooperate, then they will no longer be allowed to play.
Okay. So if you ask someone right before Title Tuesday to use Proctor and they either don't respond or say no, you might let it slide for a round or two or even that week, but sooner or later you're going to circle back, basically?
Most of the time nowadays, because we've done the PR, right? We've done State of Chess. We've been talking about Proctor for a while now. We've educated people on social media where possible. We've done enough work that we feel if someone refuses to cooperate, a lot of people are just full stop. Like, that's it. Okay, you can't play. This is not something where we're operating with a ton of leniency, given the level of investment we've made to help people become aware that this is something we're doing. That said, there are unique cases all over the place, and there are players who maybe join more last minute than others, and we want to be respectful to the fact that it is an online event where people are playing out of convenience in some ways, right? And so we're trying to find the through lines of being practical while slowly working our way, hopefully, into a world where we don't need to make exceptions because everyone is educated, everyone is on board, and we've all done our due diligence to kind of feel good about with each other, both the players feeling good about chess.com and chess.com feeling like the players are cooperating.
And in recent public-facing interviews and at the State of Chess.com, I think you guys said you had 11 closures in January of titled players and 8 in February. I might have those numbers wrong, but I believe those were the numbers. Were any of those in Titled Tuesday? Were any of those within the big cash titled events while they were going on, or were those just sort of from more casual, not big event play?
I can't answer specifically because we don't want people to to maybe be able to tease out certain parts of what we do. So I tend to avoid ever saying this person was closed only because of Title Tuesday or this person was closed only because of casual. The best way to describe it is we are closing someone on the body of their work, or in some ways, the lack of the body of their work, right?
A Lifetime Achievement Award.
Exactly. The best, and it is really the right way to do it anyway. That's totally punting on misinformation so people don't know exactly the games. It's frankly not an appropriate answer to give anyway, because even if I say we acted on this person because of their performance in Title Tuesday, the only way we have the ability to judge that Title Tuesday performance was not acceptable or an anomaly, if you will, according to that player's level of strength, is to have done cheat detection on a bunch of other games, right? And it's hard to say where that is, and frankly it's not a statistically appropriate thing to describe, because often you end up cherry picking or giving a little bit of information. It's like when I learned how to change out outlets in electricity and electrocuted myself for the first time. My uncle said, you now know the worst amount about electricity, just enough to electrocute yourself, not enough to do it right. So I would say this: you can't cherry pick the data without there being consequences, and we work hard to find any false positive, which requires a full analysis. Yes, some of those players and some of the players do cheat when the visibility is higher, when there are stakes, and perhaps getting those games in front of us got us the attention required to do a broader investigation into terms of the players' games. Does that make sense, right? Yeah. And I think that's often what happens, is because something at some point has to trip the wire. And our job is to get better and better at setting up the amount of wires that can be tripped, while also being respectful and always measuring your own false positive sense of confidence, right, before you assume that this particular wire was actually what you think it was.
Gotcha. And correct me if I'm wrong, but with the policy changes that took place like 8 months ago that I mentioned before, so now if someone gets closed, if you go to their account, it says their account is closed, or does it say their account is closed for fair play? What exactly does it say?
It says their account is closed and closed for cheating. Actually, that's a good question. I haven't checked on that myself in a little while, so you got me.
So he's going to look up a cheater right now. Unfortunately, we can't see his screen.
I'm not going to share my screen, but
alleged cheater.
I'm going to look up someone who allegedly broke the rules. I will say this: there have still been cases that were handled. Some were closed, some were closed for fair play. We are moving toward all accounts being closed for fair play, and when they are listed as such. Yes, okay, I just confirmed by looking up a particular player who is a grandmaster who was closed for fair play, and it is public, and this person's name is actually on their account, meaning in some cases it's even easier for a player to be like, well, hopefully some people don't know that was me because it's an anonymous, right, 94, I don't know, right? So, but this is the person's username is also their close enough to their real name. So yes.
Okay, and when you say it's public, that means that if you went to the page, you would see that the person was closed for fair play, but there's no statement that goes out or email blast, right?
We don't blast on social media when someone is closed. We act within our terms of service on our platform to close it, and anyone who follows our monthly reporting, which is where we kind of publish. State of Chess is like a quarterly thing, right? We do a show. Monthly, we publish, you could argue, a bit of a written state of chess, right? We give some product updates. We always close with some statistics on fair play and accounts we're closing for abuse. So yeah.
I feel like
those, yeah, go ahead.
I feel like Chess Reddit has been slacking. Usually they're right on top of outing any closed account. Maybe I just missed it, but I haven't seen the what do they call it? The whisper number on Wall Street? I haven't been seeing it online.
Well, it's interesting. There were definitely some high profile things over the last, 6 to 8 months. So I'm sure you saw some of them. There were at least a couple of grandmasters that had threads that went viral. Maybe they don't care as much when there are FMs and NMs being closed. And I'm not disparaging FMs or NMs, right? They're title players who we respect on our site. But also it's not as headline grabbing as a grandmaster or an international master at times. So, when we're closing title players, obviously we include FIDE and national and even candidate masters in those statistics. So maybe it's just that there haven't been enough high profile things to debate for Reddit, I guess.
Okay. Well, that's good news then. Speaks to what you were saying earlier of potentially a positive trend. But in your interview with Greg Mustreader, you highlighted the fact that there's minimal security even in real tournaments, and I should say face-to-face tournaments. Do you feel like that's now, as there's as big a threat of cheating in IRL chess tournaments as in online?
Yeah, obviously this is a big topic, right? And I know I was direct, and then Greg definitely clipped that sensational comment I made about FIDE not doing enough. And that's great, and because I did say that, and I mean that and meant that. I will say it's not. I don't think it's not something I don't appreciate. It's a very difficult problem to solve, because the reality is there's been a lot of over-the-board cheating scandals, Ben. I mean, you followed them. How many times? I mean, it's like every few months, like someone's with their phone or someone here and there. I mean, this has been happening for years and years and years. The thing that I think is not appreciated is that basic cheating, someone who isn't hiding well enough that they're helping someone in the room, someone who's using their phone in the bathroom or leaving for inappropriate periods of time, those things have happened, and there's been stories about them. Often they are sort of discreetly, very quickly dealt with. But what I don't think is appreciated is that if there were more advanced methods being applied, or people making even more of an effort, i.e. having a device that has a two-way signal and can receive information, especially when the amount of games played that are being broadcast online, is higher than ever. More organizers have DGT boards and take advantage of that technology. My point was, I think it is a lot easier for people to do that than people think. Basic types of metal detection and radio transmission frequency stuff, like these things cannot always pick up what you think they're picking up, and we know because we've tested it. And so it's easier, I think, for people to cheat than people realize. That said, is it easier than online? I mean, objectively, I'd have to say no, because for most casual games online, you don't have anybody watching you at all, right? There's not even a question that someone who wanted to cheat would have an easier ability to do so. When it comes to online prize events, though, I do feel differently, and I recognize the bias of my position for those who want to see it that way. But it's one of the reasons we try to talk about it as much and show our investments as best we can, and let people know that when you've got two cameras on someone, and you see their field of vision, and you see this, and you have data running, not just the algorithms that chess.com has become infamous for or famous for, whatever, and the data on the site, that moment is more secure than most people being watched in an over-the-board arena. Like, just full stop. It is. And you have all the information, all the line of sight, the constant monitoring. And I think that that's a little bit more indicative of the future of where we're trying to go online, is no stakes, no material stakes available without material observation, proctoring, and fair play analysis. And I think it's really hard for over-the-board infrastructure and organizers to keep up with that at times. So yeah, that's a long-winded answer, I guess, just to give more on my perspective there.
So you think we can avoid a future where, like, for a big online event, there needs to be an individual, like, chess.com employee, like, in the room for every player playing, something like that? That's the hope. Again, we also do other types of sweeps, and I will also say this because it kind of leaked that we were doing it in person anyway last year, and maybe it wasn't ever meant not to be leaked, for people who want it to be known that they're being closely observed. We are still sending physical proctors to people's house. We have a budget for it. It's an events line item that I approve, and it is managed by the team so that I'm not involved in every individual case, but it is part of our spend. It is part of what we are doing. So those assignments have also been both random and not so random, right? We don't hide that when it comes to this, it's a little bit like the TSA, because we don't want you to know when we're checking you or how or why, but you also need to know that we may, whenever, and however we want. And there have been players who have been assigned physical observation as a part of not just our security checkbox if they are someone who's suspicious, but we've also done it for players who we are not suspicious of at all. And it helps us have a baseline to back up and to confirm that this data and this strength is actually consistent with what we think they're capable of doing. So yeah, we are still doing that stuff. In addition to, my answer would be yes, I do think we are getting closer to a world where just with Proctor, things are way more secure and we have way more insight and visibility into what matters than we did before anyway. Wow. And in terms of sending an individual to someone's house to watch, what happens if the player in the tournament refuses? Then they cannot participate. And I'm guessing that's happened as well? We have never had a player refuse physical observation. We've had players be difficult. Right. We've had players not want to cooperate.
But the types of events where we're doing that have so much at stake, and there are separate event agreements that the players have to sign in order to compete. So they have already agreed that chess.com can and will, at its sole discretion, assign a physical proctor, and the player is expected to cooperate. And what we offer is this. In order to respect someone's privacy, for those who really don't feel comfortable with someone in their home, we will pay for a third-party location, whether that's a small conference room at a Starbucks, some sort of local recreation center. Wesley So competed from a rec center that was very close to his house when he was competing against Hans Niemann last year at the Speeches Championship. Anyone can go track and look at the video. That was not Wesley's normal chair on his bed with the couch and the cats right next to him. Wesley was in a recreation hall. So chess.com provides all the support needed for the players to feel comfortable while also expecting the players to cooperate. And that's the answer.
Okay, that makes sense. And somewhat famously, you joked with Alireza Firouzja when he was rising up the ranks. Initially, you guys flagged his account as suspicious because
we closed his account. We didn't just flag it.
And then you kind of joked that you come to understand this is just a special talent. So would you...
Well, there was actually a mix-up on that. I think the story is a fun one. Alireza and I try to joke about it every time we're on camera because it's an interesting, awkward thing. I would say it was actually less data. It was a manual error. He was closed by someone who didn't do the proper checks, who was new, to check out maybe this really strong account shares an IP with another confirmed title account, and or maybe we should actually do a broader analysis here than assume that type of signal is just cheating. We have had, but I will say this. He's not the only one, meaning the only very strong grandmaster who has made an anonymous account, gotten really good, gotten closed for cheating, then complained, and then I get to say when I tell them, I say, you're welcome. Because our job is to make, you have no reason to be competing anonymously, meaning I'll even let you keep your account anonymous, but at least let me mark in the admin notes who you are. So you're welcome. I'll just out him. It happened to Lenier, Dominguez Perez. He did it. And at one point we closed him and he was mad. And I'm like, but he wasn't really mad, but I was like, hey, you're welcome. You're welcome that the team is super on top of it, because nobody should go from 0 to that level that fast unless they are one of the world's top grandmasters or cheating. And you have no reason not to let us know that you're using that account. And we would then provide the sufficient admin notes to protect you, and people would be aware. So all I say is if we close you for cheating and you weren't a cheater because you're a strong grandmaster, you could have emailed me. And 2, you're welcome. That's the answer.
So, but in terms of false positives, do you not consider that to be one because of the extenuating circumstances you mentioned?
You can call it a false positive in the system for sure. But I think that maybe people underestimate there's a massive amount of detection and systems being built into the area. Sean Arn talked about this on the last State of Chess. Detecting bots, closing repeat offenders, whether it's IP address or consistent, they go from 0 to winning 11 games in a row. We have all types of ways that we have built the automated aspects of where we can close cheating at scale, like the tens of thousands of people who are cheating at scale, and it sucks. That's like its own animal, very important animal, and we spend a lot of time on that. We don't talk about it enough, frankly, because the title players tend to dominate the conversations with their paranoia and accusations, and understandably so. That's where the biggest eyeballs are, because that's where the money is. But that system is like, we're trying to improve that all the time to catch cheaters before they even reach like the 2000 level, let's say 2000. Then there's the world where the data and the signals, whether it's the accuracy, the other things we can track about the account, whatever it is, I want to say more, but there's an assumption made. We operate with innocence before guilt that, okay, before we just assume this data belongs in this bucket, obvious cheating, we don't have to worry about them being title players. Let's look at the analysis of the data along with a manual review that goes into somebody. We have a lot of people on staff in this area for a reason, just checking the games, right? Making sure there's nothing crazy going on here, and or doing a little more of a broader check on the account. Is there an IP address that's shared with a confirmed title player account that we've already kind of validated? There's a process that goes into that. And then there's like the upper echelon process, which is data, and only title players are allowed to close other title players in our company. We have amazing team members, multiple grandmasters, IMs, experts, FIDE masters, who all look at this, and we close title players after a thorough review. Here's the problem. We also have millions of chess games being played all the time. we have people making anonymous accounts all the time. So if someone wants to make an anonymous account who happens to be Magnus Carlsen, make no effort from a brand new IP address that while they scale the ranks, i.e. my story about Lenier, right? Like, and they get closed for cheating, I guess that's a false positive, but it's 100% one that we would stand by based on what we're trying to tackle here, right? And so yeah, and we don't pretend like we're perfect. I actually would be curious what the percentage is. I think it's over 98%, less than 100. That's maybe not the worst thing in the world, because when we get new information, if there is a proper appeal, someone is maybe acting under a different account and they were clean but very, very strong, there are reasons we will review a case and overturn it. And that's something we will always do, but we're operating probably somewhere in that level of accuracy when we close.
And every once in a while, you'll see someone you know expressing outrage that they got closed and professing their innocence. And you don't know, I don't know from the outside looking in, like I know that you guys have invested millions of dollars, and I generally think that you're doing a pretty good job with cheat detection. But I'm curious, like when the mistakes are made and the account is reopened, are you able to leave it there? Are the people looking for some sort of compensation? Like what happens next?
I mean, we don't really, well, here's what I'll say. There's not really anything that has been done to that point that is outside of chess.com's kind of jurisdiction.
Right.
And our terms of service and what someone agreed to, right? So in cases, whether it's an amateur player who we totally misread the data, maybe we had a newer staff member make a bad I don't know, there's a million reasons for that. Maybe. It doesn't happen that often, but I'm just going to say there could be reasons why we made a mistake at a low level. There could be reasons why we made a mistake at a high level. But if and when someone makes an appeal and we give them every benefit of the doubt, review the case, and ultimately decide to overturn our initial decision, nothing to that point that had been done was out of place anyway. We can reopen it. We let the person know directly that, and where we can, what we found that was new and in that information. For some players, I don't even know what it would look like, because we really don't make these mistakes with titled players, to be honest, because we already operate with such a the only time we make mistakes with titled players is the ones I told you about. Titled players who are acting anonymously and recklessly, climbing the leaderboards. So yeah, I can't think of a case that ever became like a material problem when we didn't all operate on good faith, because to some degree, chess.com is doing its job. And if we are also turning over a few, maybe not even a few, one or two cases out of every 100, isn't that also us doing our job, right? And to a certain degree, I would say that if the expectation is to catch cheaters and then listen if there might be an opportunity for us to be wrong, we always operate in that world, and we've never claimed we make closures outside of the exceptional anomaly. Sometimes an anomaly is a very significant amount of new information. And so, it's hard. I would probably have to correct what I said. I would say that we're probably operating at an even higher percentage in terms of actual closures when you think about all the massive bucket of what we're closing. I guess I would clarify, out of 100 appeals, we are maybe overturning, because not everyone appeals, because you know why? They're blatant abusive cheaters and they know it. But I think out of 100 appeals, I would say we might be overturning like 1.4 or something out of 100, probably something in that range. And I think that's just us doing our job and always being open to new information.
Okay. All right. Well, of course, I spent more time quizzing you about cheating than I intended, and there's a lot of other topics I want to talk about. One of which I'd like to touch on your book, Danny, because I got to tell you, you guys have all these events coming down the pike, new PogChamps announced, and the Adult Improver Challenge thing, etc. But to me,
I'm very excited about that.
To me, your memoir is more exciting than a chess event. Like, as a bibliophile and chess bibliophile, lover of chess memoirs, it's called Dark Squares: How Chess Saved My Life, coming in September 2025. So as much work as you're doing, like, why did you take the time to do this thing?
Oh my gosh, man. If I had known how hard it was going to be to write that book, I wouldn't have done it. Like, seriously, it was a 3.5 year process, which, if anyone does the math on that, that means Hachette bought the rights to my life story before the biggest cheating scandal in the history of our game happened in 2022, and before yet another boom happened for the chess world at post Queen's Gambit. Like, the initial pitch was, they had heard that I had a very unique upbringing, being raised in a collective, that, again, I've come to terms with myself through lots of therapy, that indeed it was a cult, and a lot of really crazy dynamics that not only were unique and interesting just to someone who wants to understand what it was to grow up in one of those groups. high demand, high control at the very least. That's the rated PG version of how to say it. That was interesting. But the fact that there was a direct tie into like my upbringing led to me getting into chess, and then here we are with chess.com. That was already an interesting enough story for Hachette to be like, okay, like we're going to do this. And I was like open and ready to kind of, start talking about my childhood in a way that you've known me for a very long time. I've never really talked about this, certainly not publicly. So I was ready to do that. And that was the book. It was Danny Rensch leading chess.com because he came from a really unique cult that got him into chess. How wild is that story? Then it was like the cheating scandal and more booms. And it became like, hey, you can't do a memoir without having some sort of breakdown on what really happened during the Hans Niemann Magnus Carlsen scandal from your perspective. And I'm like, okay, I can give you my perspective, but we're in the middle of a lawsuit.
Right.
Hans Niemann is currently suing us. I'm not even allowed to talk about this right now. So it ended up being like we're already a year and a half into the book, and now the whole book is delayed because we're in the middle of this massive lawsuit, right? And this cheating scandal. And so by the time that finds the closure it does, now we're sort of, providing even more information in terms of what this wild ride has been. So it took a really, really long time to get the final words on the pages and to feel good about the story. So yeah, that's what happened. I would not have done it again. I will not do it again. Not like that.
Yeah. I think a lot of authors end up saying that. And I think you touched on an important point there, Danny. So your story is compelling in its own right, from what I can gather. Certainly looking forward to reading it and forming my own opinion, but it sounds fascinating. But then the cheating scandal happens, and then that needs to be included in the book. And you were discussing with Greg Mustreader, Chess Media has all these projects forthcoming, the much anticipated Netflix documentary, the ESPN documentary. You mentioned this Emma Stone produced movie, but so many of them are about cheating. So to me, it's like, it's great that chess has this potential spotlight to continue its growth, but the stories are predominantly negative. Now, there is, of course, an exception with the BBC's new show, The Endgame, that I haven't had a chance to watch yet here in the United States, but certainly seems like it's achieving its mission. So how do you guys at chess.com look at that challenge of A, wanting to tell your story, but B, hopefully sharing with people that there's more to chess than cheating and butt plugs?
There's certainly more to chess than that.
And lie detectors.
Yeah, and lie detectors. And look, sometimes I take a step back and go like, how did we get here? Honestly.
Yeah.
We got here because a 16-year-old kid made a joke in Twitch chat, and then Elon Musk took it seriously and tweeted about it. And no, okay, that's the one, particular thread on the scandal. But just overall, the fact that there are so many conversations about this undeniable existential crisis we all feel as chess players, as fans, as chess business people, like no matter what chair, fans of chess.com, fans of anyone or not, like none of us deny that, like, the fact that a smartphone is better than all 10 of the top 10 players in the world combined, like, that's a problem, right? It's definitely an interesting puzzle that we're all trying to solve. Those who think some of us are doing a better job than others, we are all in this together. And this is crazy that so much attention has come to our game because of this topic. All of that said, whenever I kind of review this and think about it, I come back to two things. The first one is one that Eric and I have said many times and believe, not just because we did our own research, but because of what we also do every day under the hood at chess.com and Fair Play, is the one thing about chess that gives it a chance is if we take this seriously, you have to have access to this information in real time. So in other games, you can cheat ahead of time, whether it's blood doping or performance-enhancing drugs, whatever. And so there have to be very complex, convoluted, in some ways even more expensive systems and infrastructure in place to track this stuff. In our world, if people just continue to educate themselves on what's possible, if we take the proper steps to really limit access to outside information, delay broadcasts where appropriately, I think we can limit cheating. I really think we can. And because you have to have that information and you have to be doing it in real time. So that's a positive that I hope like everyone can kind of come around to. We talk about this on Netflix. Whenever this Untold comes out, we did talk about it. And then the second thing I would say is this, like, we forget this because we live in our world, Ben, and this existential crisis of cheating through AI and phones and everything has become like very scary for everybody. But a lot of sports have dealt with cheating scandals for a long time. There's all kinds of cheating scandals that have happened in baseball over the years, right? There are all types of sign stealing, ball greasing, PED things where they announce the death of baseball. There are all types of things that happen in football with sign stealing. There are all types of blood doping scandals in other whether it's Olympic or bike or cycling sports. What ultimately brings people back are they interested in the product itself, and are there interesting stories to follow? And in some ways I go like, I can't stop cheating either, right? I literally cannot prevent people from cheating. And does that mean that every story about cheating is like good for the game? Not at all, right? But I think if the people in the game continue to be good and kind and overall honest, and overall we are all in this together trying to fight cheating, I think overall the bucket of the chess world is a bunch of really interesting personalities who've gotten into some crazy stuff since the game has gone digital online. And there's all kinds of reasons to believe that chess is better than ever for the players in terms of their livelihoods and creators. And I know I'm always taking the chair of sounding like I'm on some freaking soapbox about this stuff because I feel like I'm like defending it from the optimistchess.com. But I really do think like we can stop cheating in real time. Things that get anyone thinking about the chess world, as long as the overall amount of chess players remain good and kind and a good representation of our community, then it's okay. And then we just try to have unique stories, you know? Like I opened my book with a conversation that's never been shared that I had with Henrik Carlson right before the cheating scandal broke. I don't even know if I'm allowed to say that. I just said that with Hachette. Hachette might be mad. But my book opens up with something that, you know, has never been public before. That I don't even know if it'll be on Netflix, actually, depending on... We told them everything, but I don't know what version they cut together. We'll see what Netflix does. But my book will be my version anyway of the truth, regardless of how it is presented by others.
Okay. And any word from Netflix on when The Untold is coming?
It was supposed to be like last August, then it was supposed to be April. I don't know if it's even going to hit the April season at this point. We're in March and there's no specific date. Chess.com does not have a secret date that it hasn't been told. Netflix answers to no man or woman or anybody. They do what they want. And so I don't think it's coming in April. I think that it may be hitting the fall season at this point, given that we expect to get some kind of heads up and we still haven't been given it.
Okay. And in your interview with Greg Mustreader, you hit on what I thought was another important point. Listeners should definitely check out that interview for more color. But you were talking about the famed Magnus Hikaru match that fell through, and you were saying that once it had fallen through, they reached a point where the scarcity was kind of gone from Magnus playing Hikaru, because once Chess.com acquired Chess24, they started to play in events, and it was no longer like, oh, finally, you know, the two players from the opposite factions get a chance to meet, because they'd played a lot. And I feel like that's a problem generally in chess. The events are often closed, especially OTB, but online as well. And the players have played each other so many times. Now, you talk about the importance of storytelling. What can we do to differentiate chess events and make them feel special?
Yeah, and there's also a lot of chess events, right?
So many, yeah.
And so when everything matters, nothing does.
Exactly.
Right? And everyone wants you to believe that their thing matters more, right? And I mean, man, you just like broke my brain because I talk about this so much. I think about this so much. It's like sometimes I go like, Danny, stop giving such long-winded answers. Be more concise. But I'm like, it's hard to talk about this without thinking about, you know, a lot of problems. I would say overall, stories in other sports are told through the lens of someone who achieved greatness, underdog stories. You become attached to this person's success regardless of the color jersey they wear. I would say regardless of the event's dysfunction, we need more players being more accessible and providing us with more insight into who they are, because that is a thing that really keeps people tuning in, even if it's blitz, rapid, esports, classical, freestyle, doesn't freaking matter. If they care about the players, they will tune in. And so a lot of what we've been trying to do is to help provide, we've done docs on our YouTube channels. We, you know, are involved in other projects that will be coming out at some point as far as kind of behind the scenes looks at players. We've done everything we can there. So that's, I think I would argue that the Magnus Hikaru story, and while it was a total accident, while we ultimately did arrive at a place where it just, the hype unfortunately had been lost through all the unfortunate circumstances that got us there. I won't retell that. And Hikaru and Magnus have played each other so many times that you're right. There's a little bit of like, all right, how do we make this new one matter more, right? Although I think viewership says people still care because people love when those two guys throw down, right? But I think when it comes to this other stuff, this is a real problem, because even if we fix the amount of players who are interesting, the amount of times I've been in a chair on behalf of Chess.com negotiating with some very large, media companies. And I'm not saying that as a flex. I'm saying the amount of times I've been there and basically been told, you guys have so much going on. No one owns chess. We don't even know where to begin here. Arguably, the event with the most legacy is the one that we're the least interested in because Magnus isn't playing anymore. I don't even know what to tell you guys. So it's hard to solve. And I am on a soapbox about that. I've told every organizer directly to their face in private. I've told Arkady Dvorkovich this. I've told everyone, hey, we are failing to provide, a really great coordinated effort here that is an understandable through line for larger audiences. And I am interested in chess.com being a part of solving this, but respectfully, I don't think a lot of other people actually care about solving it at this time. And the players certainly don't, because there's a lot of money and a bunch of events going down, and they can kind of keep playing in the events. And that's ultimately what matters to them, is their livelihood and their family. And I get it. So,
yeah, there's sort of a prisoner's dilemma aspect to it. What's good for everyone is not necessarily good for each individual actor. And I've heard people like Levy mention, and I certainly echo this, one thing that I think would go a long way is just to have clearly defined majors like they do in golf and tennis. These are the biggest tournaments of the year. Other stuff may not be as important, but maybe you get to see people from a different angle. In tennis, they come to your town in the smaller events. What would need to happen for there to be sort of more consensus? I mean, sort of there's a wisdom of crowds where people can decide on their own what's important, but I think some sort of overarching system would be quite beneficial. What do you think can be done to advance that?
Oh man, I don't even know where to begin. I mean, I'll say we have been bouncing around our private calendar this year because there's just so many events that are happening. The Grand Chess Tour expanded. There are two major things happening this calendar year that haven't even been announced yet. And I'm not the person who should be leaking those things because they're not chess.com events. But there are so many things going on, and the amount of money that is being invested is not in touch with the reality of the market. Viewership is not there to justify the level of prize funds that exist. And the fact that there's almost no room on the calendar for all the top players in the world, I guess one thing will be good. It might open the door for some of the players to get some invites who wouldn't normally have been there when chess is such a feast or famine kind of culture. But it's crazy, man. And when you have a market that is this far out of whack commercially, what does it take to enter the market? To outspend again. Right. To get your event to be the more important one than this event. So it just continues to contribute to this situation. And there are so many events. I think it would, I don't know what it would take. It's great. Honestly, it's also awesome. I sound like I'm complaining about it. The fact that there are this many people, this many companies, this many philanthropists, this much excitement about someone and their vision of chess is awesome. And I get that. But speaking to the fact that it doesn't really make a lot of sense and there's just so much going on, it would be like the NBA, except the players play all year and they change teams all the time because you're just going to play for this billionaire's backyard, and then this and that. And so it's really hard to find a unified vision as far as the events cycle themselves. I think the players are fascinating. I think there are all kinds of interesting stories in the game. But as far as the event payoff, do they make or miss the shot to win the championship? Chess struggles with that.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned the NBA because on a much the problem is not as big, but people complain about how many regular season games there are in that as well. And Danny, to your point about if everything matters, then nothing matters, there's a fundamental irony there because people are trying to promote chess, but I feel like it might be counterproductive. So I feel like we agree on the problem, but what can we do? How can we narrow the options and make them more meaningful?
It's really hard to say because, like I said, it's if everything matters, nothing matters. At the same time, there are more people interested in, like I said, developing their vision of chess. There are more people playing chess than ever before, online or otherwise. And I think the market of chess learners is also very high. I'm really excited for our Coach Champs event and the Improver Challenge, but that's just a small kind of campaign in the calendar year to represent that there's a really large community of the chess punks movement, the adult learner movement, right? And those numbers just continue to be at peak as far as all the things we can track. So again, I guess I'm taking a bit of an optimist, sort of positive spin on the fact that I don't know how to solve that problem. Inherently, it has not currently been shown to be a problem preventing the sort of, straight, predictable growth. But predictable growth tends to be based on the information you have, and you can kind of predict the seasonality and the behavior based on the data that you have in front of you. But I'm interested in transformative growth. You know, transformative growth happens when you combine elements that previously were not thought to go together. And that's something that we've seen happen a few times with major media. The Queen's Gambit providing really in-depth, human, heartbreaking storytelling. And then you had, with this idea that you could become a chess master from anywhere, you had PogChamps, literally like the collab event that completely changed chess's presence in the online chess community on Twitch and YouTube and otherwise. And like those things happen when you say like, oh, this crazy actor against this crazy streamer is going to play chess, right? And when I look at the big picture, like it's hard for us to have transformative growth from an event space, meaning the viewership you see watching freestyle, how do we get zeros on it? Not crooked numbers, but zeros on it, right? How do you even add more zeros onto the World Championship viewership? I think for transformative growth to happen, we have to have a product that makes sense to the next level, again, of viewership, right? And the mainstream audiences need a simple entry point. And some people say that's me arguing to like hurt the game, make it too fast, or make it all about the beginner audience. That's actually not inherently true. Those aren't things that have to be true at the same time, meaning if you watch Formula One Drive to Survive, it's actually very complicated for anyone who wants to know the rules of F1 and the FIA who regulate that. But you don't feel overwhelmed with really simple storytelling, people who are thoughtful and smart about how to make things interesting and understandable. And basically getting someone into your game needs to have a product that makes a little more sense and is a little more simple and a little more consistent, whether that's time controls, an annual storyline, less convoluted qualification systems, a combination of wild card and country chooses, all the stuff that I could go on and on about because your audience has probably been in this world for a long time too, right? And I think it's hard for us to sell that part of our product to the broader world at this time. Is it inherently a horrible problem for the chess community? I don't know. We see a lot of good trends happening in all the areas I mentioned, but I do believe our next jump as far as a transformative moment can only happen through some sort of conversation around how to clarify this.
Yeah. And, you know, sometimes things just emerge that couldn't be predicted. You know, sometimes you might have like a Caitlin Clark phenomenon occur, you know, another Judith Polgar emerges, and it's not like guys in a boardroom or women in a boardroom who come up with it. It's just a story that develops on its own and propels itself. So we can always hope for that. But other than that, Danny, it sounds like we agree on the problem. And I know you guys are working hard on solutions, and chess is great, whether it grows or not. So it's, you know, to people,
I agree.
To people like me, it would be nice, but I mean, you know, chess is never going to be the NFL, and that's fine. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be. One thing I was curious about, Danny, is, you know, you had the merger with Chess24, and obviously that was a big change. Obviously, Chess24 had its amazing suite of announcers, and you guys have great announcers. And then everything came together, and there's a lot of events, too many, we might say, but still, like, there's only a few commentators. Like, how do you guys choose who covers which events?
It's super difficult, you know, and especially because chess.com is also covering and partnering with some events where we actually are not the ones making the choice. It's on our site. You see our logo. We are partnered with X organizer and helping bring their vision to the largest audiences. Basically, they put their show on our stream key, but we're actually not the ones making the talent decisions. It's hard because while there are a lot of events, there are also so many different, you know, kind of mouths to feed in that way, right? And we have debated bringing back sort of like an advanced grandmaster stream, having a beginner style stream, this and that. But ultimately, it's kind of hard to know how to solve the problem to get every particular fan what they want. Yeah. Every fan likes their favorite commentator and that particular personality. So it is hard. We try to do it in a balanced way. We try to be as fair as we can across the board. We try to be proactive with the schedules as we're setting them so that we know that someone can't do an event. So we're already giving this other person a chance. And we need to get a little more organized here from my perspective, just because, we never thought we'd be in this position either, basically running a 300-person talent agency known as the Chess.com Streamers Program, which is all the streamers out there. And then there's like the coverage of our events and all the commentators there, and there's all kinds of stuff going on. We grew from, a guy who was self-producing his bullet brawls in a closet. That's right. Me, right? That's where we came from. And so it's like, all right, I don't know how to solve this totally. Besides, we also encourage a lot of our partners to use different talent too, to try to spread out the love, right? So that it's not always the same people. But I don't know. I wonder how other industries have done this. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how many corollaries there are. I mean, I guess you know more about e-gaming than I do. There might be some corollaries there in terms of stuff growing from the online sphere, because it seems like with TV broadcast, they tend to keep it a narrow amount of people, which I'm not necessarily advocating for, although I was, of course, disappointed that Danya's sort of stepping back from doing more announcing, and we haven't seen Robert Hess.
We all want Danya back. Best to Danya.
Yeah, so. Shout out to Danya. He's awesome. And Robert Hess hasn't been announcing as much. The chess.com OG, well, you're
OG
the true
crew.
You're the true OG. But yeah, I mean, I know it's challenging, but it sure seems like Reddit's never happy.
It's sad, it's not the glory days of the OG crew. I feel like the peak of my enjoying that part of my career before I was frankly unable to do more commentary was me and Robert and Fabiano on the couch for the 2021 World Championship. But it's, everyone has their own personal stuff going on. Obviously, Danya has his reasons. People have different schedules and different things now than they used to be. I get sad about it. I miss it. I miss doing every show myself with Robert and kind of the OG crews that we all had doing commentary. So, and it's hard to make Reddit happy.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, anyway, shout out to Robert and Danya. Yeah, and obviously everyone loves Peter Lecoq. He's the one guy who has like the 100% approval rating, and he's great as well. But I also, Danny, wanted to ask you about the closures of some of the websites you acquired, Chess24, of course. And then at the beginning of this year, you guys announced some changes to Chessable short and sweet access that there was a pretty big backlash about. What lessons were learned from those experiences?
I'll go in reverse order. I think huge lessons learned in the Chessable what is the right word? Fiasco or whatever the right word is, right? Where,
to be honest.
It was a decision that didn't have enough eyes on it when it was made, combined with, I think, just a poor kind of comms strategy by us, and we did not appreciate how not only how drastic and how bad the changes felt, but then the proper way to communicate it. So I do think the team has done an excellent job kind of making up for that in the best way that we can, and communicated that, look, while there have been some changes planned to not just do really great things like bring Chessable to chess.com/courses, which might really increase the marketplace for everybody, right? And that's a huge hope we have there. It was one of the theses, like I said, that we had, that we could really provide a lot of value here. So that's a good thing. But then there was also the honest truth that was shared in terms of, the Chessable value prop not really being profitable and or at all for a while, and now very kind of close to it, that the team has been trying to think about how to make sure this is sustainable so that marketplace exists and provides the support that it does forever, while also not making the changes the way that they did, hurting the community and communicating it in a poor way. So there were just all kinds of lessons. Like more thoughtful workflows were established after that. We have a proper, I think, system now to ensure that we get enough eyes on it. These things do happen. I feel proud of how the team handled it when we were honest with ourselves that we made a big mistake. We communicated it clearly. And I think where we're headed is going to be a lot of really great things for, I'll call it the marketplace, because I don't even think about it as Chessable or chess.com courses. The marketplace of professionals who are looking to provide this stuff for the community. I think there's just so much upside ahead for that, despite the big mistakes that we made there. And then the other one you asked about was Chess24.
Yeah, the closure of the site.
Yeah, that was hard because I said on camera, look, we're not closing Chess24. We have no plans to do it. And that was the truth at the time. And what happened over the last 2 years of diving under the hood, I always want to get some of the Chess24 tech leadership up here to kind of help us to kind of explain that, look, this was actually being held together with more duct tape and more manual workflows to keep these bells and whistles alive than people realized for a while, than chess.com even realized. And as we were diving under the hood, while also knowing that we had kind of just started to hit our stride in the very long rewrite of the chess bomb technology to integrate into chess.com/events. So maybe what hasn't been told before is like, OGs of the community know that we acquired Chessbomb a long time ago, right? And that was its own sort of long process to try to both support that tech as it existed while integrating the parts of it that we needed for chess.com/events. That was the goal, right? Over time, as you're standing up this sort of newer technology built on more efficient languages, better tech stacks lead to better stability and faster browsing, right? So like, I always have to remind people there's a reason you're developing and improving the software, because you have to stay with the times for your stuff to stay cutting edge. While you're doing that, you inevitably do face choices at times of how much resources go into supporting a platform that is on a language that frankly will stop being supported at some point, right? Whether it's by browsers or other types of devices. And so you make a call, and what happened around the Chess24 thing was while faster than I guess the Chessbomb integration, was sort of similar in terms of what we got our hands on was less stable and less worthy of future investing than we meant, or that we thought, when I said what I said and meant what I said on camera, right? And so I guess the lesson there for me was I've been coached by people to well, first of all, the piece of advice I never take is talk less, smile more. Danny, talk less, smile more. I don't seem to listen to that one. But the second thing is I try not to speak in as many certainties, because I have to be honest with myself that the delta of my public facing position combined with the things that I frankly am not involved in as much in anymore, right? That delta has to be appreciated, that it's a little bit bigger than it used to be. And so I made a comment that was true, but later looked like I was not telling the truth and or we had other plans. That is not a situation that is applying to Chessable. Chessable as a standalone marketplace has a lot of reasons to exist and continue to. It's not in the same technology position that Chess24 was. There's a lot of great things there. This is a value add to the community that we're doing with chess.com/courses. It's not indicative of what we did in the past, but we are doing the best we can to bring the chess.com value and appreciate what we have and what the community likes about this stuff. And that's where we live a lot of the time in these areas.
And of course, it's admirable to me that you're owning some mistakes that were made. They're inevitable when you're running an organization as large as you are. Mistakes are inevitable. The exact nature, obviously, can change. But of course, there were a lot of comments online after the changes that there's sort of like people feel like a trust has been broken. And now they worry that Chessable, for example, as the courses migrate to chess.com, Chessable itself will disappear. People worry, I've paid for all these digital courses. I want a book in my hands because this digital course could just be gone tomorrow. How do you respond to people who say stuff like that?
First of all, I understand where trust was broken with Chess24. So the best place to start is to validate that I don't think anyone is crazy or wrong, and no one else is in the room where it happens, I guess. So they are sort of taking people at their word. So I just want to validate that I get it, and not trying to be defensive about that, even with the perspective I have in terms of 100% standing by what happened with Chess24, both in that I was being honest, even if ultimately I shouldn't speak with such certainties, and that we ended up making the best decision based on the fact that we were in a bad position in that game, and we did what we could to salvage what we did. When it comes to Chessable, we have thought about this in a number of different ways. Strategically, there's just a lot more reasons to keep Chessable is like its own massive website and community and features and tools that we are actually a long time away from having at chess.com/courses. There's just not even the business reason for us to even be thinking about that, and that's why we currently are not. When it comes to chess.com/courses, this is taking, while it's really important to the community that has it now, it's taking that community and giving it a spotlight that frankly could be absolutely game-changing. I talk about adding zeros onto an industry versus crooked numbers, right? This is a transformative growth moment if we can figure out a way to 10 million daily active users, just a fraction of that more to this motivation to let me get a course on this opening or let me get a course on this endgame. That is upside and inherently doesn't connect to the idea that, we have everything on Chessable would always be available on chess.com/courses anyway. I'm trying to unpack what you said about the user saying it. I'm like, we're going to make everything that's on Chessable available on chess.com. People will get to choose the platform, the UI, the UX that they love. We're going to add as many eyeballs as we can to this industry as possible. And long term, who knows? Maybe chess.com/courses remains a place where you tend to find more beginner-friendly content, right? Then maybe Chessable is the brand that people associate when they're ready to make that jump. Either way, even that funnel would be better than what we currently have to add the value of chess.com to Chessable. So there's nothing else I can say besides I get it, I validate, I understand it's hard. Also, we're playing poker with our cards backwards here, just like I was when I was as honest as I was about Chess24. And I would frankly rather do that and occasionally have a foot in my mouth than be acting in some way where people get a corporate sense that chess.com isn't themselves or whatever that looks like. So I messed up if that broke trust, but it was literally an honest mistake. It was not anything that wasn't being shared honestly. It was that I probably shouldn't have spoken so certainly when I didn't understand. And now I'm saying the best I can. I'm not saying 100%, actually. It's better not to say that. I'm saying, I'm being honest, that there are no business plans, whether 1 year, 5 year, 10 year, there are no discussions happening about Chessable in the same way. And I think the upside of what we're doing here is very different than any sort of Chess24 comparison. One last thing, especially when the audiences are basically cannibalizing each other there, right? Like they're either watching at chess.com events or Chess24. And so it just doesn't feel like the same comparison, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's nothing to do but move forward. So I totally understand. And I know from a creator perspective, I know a lot of the people I interview are really excited for Chessable to potentially reach this new audience. And obviously that's something that can help a lot of people in the creator community. So as we wrap up, Danny, let's go a little rapid fire. Like, what event are you most excited about this year?
Definitely always the Speed Chess Championship for me. I'm going to commentate more of the SCC this year than I probably have in some other years, or at least in some more recent ones back when I used to do every show. But so I'm excited for the Speed Chess Championship. I'm excited for the Esports World Cup. I want to see what continues to happen with the esports teams investing in chess and signing players, and that being something that's super awesome for the players. So I just got a heads up. I won't say who, but someone just gave me a WhatsApp that they just got signed, so that'll be announced soon.
Cool.
Another player will join the arena. So I'm excited for those two things if I was just to quickly pick.
Can you tease anyone in PogChamps, by the way? Or is that?
Oh, we announced the field today.
I missed that. Okay.
Yeah, we got Dr. Lupo, we got Hungry Box.
This is really going to show how old I am. I'm going to have no idea who
exactly.
people are. Go ahead.
Dr. Lupo's an OG, though. He's a bit of a dad of the streaming community, too. But it's super awesome to have him. We tried to get him before, but yeah, the field is up.
Any
I don't know when
sports
people will be watching this.
Any sports people or?
Yeah, we have an Olympian, and we have another footballer. So anyway, we got Dr. Lupo. We got Premier League player from Crystal Palace, Abiri Easy E. I don't even know how to pronounce that last name.
Bringing back the dad, huh?
Yeah, Tag is a super big variety content creator in France. I think he was the first creator to climb Mount Everest and document the whole thing, which was a cool thing he did. He streamed with Anna Kramling like a month ago and had a ton of viewers. So he's super pumped. So it's gonna be a lot of fun.
Good stuff. Back to the rapid fire. What would you say the hardest part of your job is?
The hardest part of my job is that it is 24/7. And I have to choose when and how I operate, because the demands, not just the dramas and the crises that spill over into social media, but the expectations operationally for a remote and global company are hard. If I'm honest, like, I don't know that human beings were built. Modern day CEOs are doing things at times that are like, I don't know if we were built for this stuff. And so if you ever lose your way and lose your discipline on the things that are really good for you, whether that's like exercise or meditating or good sleep, like if I slip up for a second, it feels like I can't keep up anymore, because the level of just like feeling good, it requires sometimes to run our company and to do the chess world at this global scale is hard. So you have to be very careful about how you pick and choose where your energy is.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially having a family. And when Nate Solon and I interviewed your CEO, Eric Albest, he mentioned that you guys, at the time, at least a year ago, were still thinking about potentially going public someday. A few companies have been spun off since then from your acquisition. Are you guys still thinking about that long term?
We don't know, honestly. I feel like for many years, Eric and I were allowed to answer what's the end game? What's the exit by flipping someone the bird? We were like, there is no exit. Get out of here. Like the mission is infinite. Now that we have grown to the scale that we're at, we do have the investors that we do with General Atlantic and the small group of those who have shares. I guess the lucky individuals, I would say that we have expectations on us that are different than before, where we are not allowed to answer those questions with a go bleep yourself, right? We have to give an answer. And then if you're forcing me to give an answer, and I have to think about the long-term home of this company that we all love, this game, I go like, I would never want to belong in a certain type of portfolio. I don't want to call out what I think about certain types of PE firms or operations, but that doesn't feel very good to me. If we didn't find the perfect kind of strategic partner who appreciates the legacy, evergreen, amazing, soulful joy that is our game, then I don't want them as a partner. So maybe going public and letting the world hold chess.com accountable if it loses its way. Maybe that's the best way to do it. That's why Eric, I think, said what he said. He and I have talked about this a million times over. We don't know. we're not allowed to answer anymore with we don't have to answer that question, but the answer is we don't know yet.
Yeah, that makes sense. And very last question, when we did talk to Eric, he made it sound like, again, making note of all the responsibilities that you noticed and the stress that comes along with the great job that you have, that he may not do it forever. What about you? Do you feel like you have a similar runway to Eric, or are you all systems go right now?
I feel like Chris Farley. I'm like, I've got no place else to go. I don't know. Well, everybody has those thoughts, right? I think I've at times thought about, broadening something outside of the chess world, whether it's content or speaking in some capacity that people might find helpful. I think sometimes I think about what may or may not happen with my book, and whether there are conversations people want to have about the things I went through, or my views on kind of mental health or bigger topics that I sort of touch on broadly with the struggles I had. So I do think that sometimes getting a little bit out of the world of paranoid fair play discussions all the time might be a better use of my time, to be like, hey, let's talk about overcoming this challenge, or how I dealt with depression and substance abuse for a long time in my early 20s that people don't know about. Like, let's actually make a difference outside of whether we believe this person cheated in Title Tuesday. I do fantasize about that every once in a while and think about what that might look like post chess.com. At the same time, with that answer being given, we are right in the middle of it, man. The chess world still has so much upside, and we have so many fun days ahead. And frankly, my days are filled 9 to 5 and beyond still, in a way that I don't think it would be responsible for me to think about moving on until maybe some things are in a different place. And yeah, I think about life after chess, but I think chess will always be a part of my life. And so no further questions, Your Honor, I guess.
Okay.
So I don't know. No, I'm kidding. I hopefully that was a good enough answer to say that I think about it, but I feel like we are in it to win it for some time still. And I'm excited for the ride.
Okay. Good to hear. You guys have come a long way since you, like you said, doing the bullet brawls in your closet. Well, thanks, Danny. I know you're a busy guy, so I'll let you go. But really appreciate it as always, and look forward to the events this year.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you. And by the way, I want to say you were the first podcast I ever went on. You were the first, not just chess, but any podcast I went on. So I didn't realize it was 8 years ago, but you were the first podcast I ever had the joy of being on. So thanks for having me then, and thanks for having me now.
Sure, yeah, really showing how old we are.
Shout out to the OG chess community.
Shout out. All right, thanks, Danny.